Hello, welcome to week 1 of American Government. I'm Mrs. Griffin. I will be your American Government teacher from now until the end of the school year. Hopefully, we'll be able to do this in person, but in the meantime, you've got me on camera. This week, as our first week, I mentioned on my intro video last week that we're going to be talking about the US Constitution and the American government. This week, though, I wanted to do it more broadly. I want to kind of explore what is government. Is government necessary? And ultimately, you are going to decide by the end of this week what is the best form of government. Do you think we're currently in the best form of government, or do we need to switch things up a little bit? I want you to imagine for a minute. You came into CTEC last week and we didn't give you any rules. You just walked in and did what you want. What do you think it would be like? What would any school be like without any rules? Now bring in the government. Sometimes we need someone, something, some entity to come in and protect us, right? It might be a teacher stepping in for a fight. It might be a man protecting someone from getting hit by a bat or a ball at a baseball game. But we ultimately look for someone to protect us, and that is our government. So if we go back to that classroom or to that school, some of you may be willing to admit that we do need some sort of government, some sort of administration or teachers establishing rules. And so what our founders and any group of people who have ever started a government from scratch or meant to continue a government, the decision that they had to come up with is what is the right balance? How much government is too much government? In this day and age, do you like the idea or does it scare you the fact that the government may be watching your TikTok videos? Is that too much government? Or do we need to scale it back a little bit? So that brings us to the question, what is government? Is it power? Is it protection? Is it laws and rules? Is it entertainment? What is government? Why am I making you take American government class? Harry Browne said that government is force, pure and simple. There's no way to sugarcoat that. And because government is force, it will attract the worst elements of society. People who want to use government to avoid having to earn their living and to avoid having to persuade others to accept their ideas voluntarily. What do you think about that? Is government force? Is it going to make things even worse? Government, by definition, is the institution through which a society makes and enforces its public policies. It's made up of the people who exercise these powers and then all who have authority and control over people. You can imagine in a school, the government would be the administrators and the teachers, the hall monitors, people working for you, right? That's your government. The public policy of a government is everything that a government decides to do. So it can include the taxes, defense, education, crime, healthcare, transportation, environment, working conditions. All of these things fall under the government. They have to have the power to carry out all of these entities. They have to have the power to regulate schools, regulate taxes, regulate healthcare. These are the things that our government does, and this is their public policy. So we know why we have government, sort of. We know what government is, and we know that there's public policies. However, how do these things even happen? I'm going back to what you probably learned in fourth grade, eighth grade, even last year in 10th grade. You may remember learning the 3 branches of government. There's 3 types of government powers that we're going to learn about, that we're going to explore this year. So we have the legislative power. This is the power to make laws, frame public policies. The legislative power, you're looking at Congress, the Senate, the House of Representatives. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into what they do. Our second type of power is the executive power. So this is the power to execute, enforce, administer law. Our president is going to fall under the executive branch, the vice president, their cabinet, anyone who is enforcing the law. That's our executive branch. Last, we have the judicial power. So the judicial power is the power to interpret laws. They determine what our Constitution means. They determine what laws mean, and then they settle disputes within the society. So think judicial, judges. So that's where we're going to find the Supreme Court and other courts. So you may be wondering, where do these powers come from? Bring in the Constitution. All of you should have received a copy of this. This pocket Constitution explains all of those powers that I just mentioned you. Article 1 is going to go over the legislative branch and all the powers that Congress has. A constitution, by definition, is a body of fundamental laws setting out the principles, structures, and processes of a government. We have all year, though, to look at this Constitution. Today, as promised, I wanted to talk about why government and what is government. And I want you to, by the end of the week, be able to decide what you think the best form of government is. So 2 kind of very basic overviews of types of government would be looking at a dictatorship versus a democracy. In a dictatorship, you're going to find one person or a small group of people who are in charge, and they do what they want, basically, without consulting with the people. In a democracy, on the other hand, all the power comes from the people, so the people have a say in anything that's going to happen. Sometimes you might hear people say that the United States is a democracy, but I want you to truly think about the definition of democracy and how I said it. Does the government have to do exactly what we tell them? Does the power rest with the majority of the people? So let's go back even more and let's find out where we get these kind of different forms of government. What are the major political ideas? How, from the beginning of time, have they created governments? And so we're going to look at four major political ideas. We're going to look at the force theory, the evolutionary theory, the divine right theory, and social contract. So, under force theory, states were created by powerful leaders who forced people to accept their sovereignty. Some historical examples that you might think of are the Romans, Nazi Germany, Soviet Union. They took their government by force. Next, we have the evolution theory. So, this is that states grew out of family groups and they placed sovereignty in the hands of the oldest and the wisest. So, if you think of Native American tribes, some Brazilian tribal societies, those are placing government in the hands of the elders. Next, we have the divine right theory. So, under this, God created the state and gave those of royal birth sovereignty over the state. Some historical examples: the royal families of Europe, Chinese emperor, Aztec, and Incan societies. These are all saying that you are born into this power. The last and the most common is the social contract theory. So the social contract theory is the idea that citizens agree to give up some of their freedom so that the states could better serve their needs. And one historical example of that is going to be the United States, as well as a lot of modern democracies. States have taken all of these theories into consideration when they create working governments, and no two have been alike. All governments are different. Okay, let's talk now about the different types of governments. But first, the U.S. Constitution. Can you turn with me to page 1? I'll wait.
To do. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare at hand, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
Oh, sorry. I love this song, and I play it every year. So you may remember learning it, some of you in maybe elementary school, but that's the preamble of the Constitution. We the people of the United States. And so it outlines what our Constitution is meant to do, what our government is meant to do. Form a more perfect union. They're fixing the problems of the Articles of Confederation. Establish justice. Make sure things are fair. Ensure domestic tranquility, peace at home. Provide for the common defense. We have our military. Promote the general welfare. We have water, clean air. We're all able to eat. We all have somewhere to live. And secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. So that's the purpose of our government. Let's talk about the different governments that we're going to find. So in order to classify government, often what they're going to do is they're going to look at 3 different classifications: who can participate, the geographic distribution of the government power, and then the relationship between the branches. When we look at who can participate, there's 2 basic forms, as I mentioned a little bit ago: democracies and dictatorship. Is it the people or is it a ruler? When we look at democracies, the supreme authority lies with the people. As Lincoln described it, government of the people, by the people, for the people. It can either be direct, in which there's a pure democracy, or more so what we find kind of in the United States, an indirect democracy. So with that being said, an indirect democracy could also be called a representative democracy, where the people elect representatives to speak on their behalf. Does that sound familiar at all? So if you talk to people and ask them what kind of government we have, you might hear someone say democracy, republic, representative democracy, Republican form of government. They use those terms interchangeably. The most important thing to know, though, about the United States government is that the people rule. We are sovereign. Let's talk about what we're not, and that's a dictatorship. In a dictatorship, the government is not held accountable for what they've done. You'll find 2 forms of a dictatorship: an autocracy and an oligarchy. In an autocracy, auto meaning one, there's one person who has unlimited power. In an oligarchy, you're looking more at a small group of people who hold unlimited power. Many might think of Adolf Hitler as an autocracy, as he was the one person in rule. But if you really look at his government, he did have a small group of people who worked with him and for him. All right, a third way to classify governments is where is the power geographically located at? And so we're going to look at three different ways. In the United States, we have what's called a federal government. Federal meaning we have the government is divided between our central or our federal government among the rest of the country. So in the United States, we have a federal or central government, and then we also have all state governments, and then we have local governments, and that's a federal government. There's a division of power based on the geographic location. So the United States is a federal government. Some examples of federal governments are going to be Germany, Canada. A unitary government, on the other hand, there's one centralized agency, one place where all the government is held. And so you're not really getting any states or towns who have power. They might have some that the national government gives them, but they're not really making any decision. Whilst in the United States, with the federal government, you all have found out that the states are in charge of education, right? They're in charge of the mask mandate. That's something that the federal government has not told the states yet what to do. And so in our federal government, we do have power within the states. The last example that we're looking at is going to be a confederate government. So that's an alliance of independent states. So a confederate government has a central government that matters only what they handle matters that have been brought to them. And so they're not making decisions outright. But if there's an issue that comes, if there's a war, if there's a national issue, then that's when they'll make. Sorry, technical issue. As I was saying, if there's a war, anything with defense or foreign policy. All right, let's move to the third way that we classify governments, and that's the relationship between two branches, the legislative and the executive branch. If you remember from earlier, the legislative branch is going to be the branch that's making laws and framing public policy. In the United States, that's our Congress. The executive branch is going to be the branch enforcing the laws. In the United States, that's the president. So in a presidential government, which is what we have here in the United States, those two branches are separate and co-equal. We, the people, elect a president. The president does what he is meant to do. He enforces laws. He cannot write laws. He cannot amend the Constitution, right? That is his responsibility as president. We also, as the people, elect individual representatives to Congress, both House of Representatives and Senate. They make the laws. They cannot veto a law because they are not the president. They cannot enforce the law because they are not the president. They can't interpret the law because they're not the judicial branch. So the legislative branch, we elect them. The executive branch, we elect them. They do their own thing. They're not in a combination with each other. The other form is going to be a parliamentary government. So in a parliamentary government, the people would elect a legislative branch. Maybe they'll call it parliament, maybe they'll call it Congress. And from that branch, they will then choose a leader. They will choose a prime minister or they'll choose a president. We are not that type of government, but you do find that type of government in the UK. So that's how we classify the governments. Have you started to think what you think might work better? Are democracies better than dictatorships? Do you have an opinion yet? Do you think you will have an opinion? Do you feel confident in the government of the United States? Let's move on a little bit to the economies in government. So the economy of a government is the wealth and resource of a country or region, especially in terms of production and consumptions of goods and services. How much of the economy should the government control? So that's a debate you'll hear in politics, is how much say should the government have on a country's economy? In a free enterprise system, there's private or corporate ownership of capital goods. So the government is not sticking their hands or their noses in it whatsoever, right? The individuals or corporates, they're able to make these decisions. In a mixed economy, there are some private enterprises, there are some corporate enterprises, but there are government regulation and promotion. And so in the United States, for instance, the government's going to regulate, they might regulate the air quality, they might regulate how many items you can produce, they might regulate price in some way. The fact that restaurants now have to list calorie count, that's the government regulating, right? So that is going to be a mixed economy. The law of supply and demand is a law that states when supplies of goods and services becomes plentiful, prices tend to drop. When supplies become scarcer, prices tend to rise. I used to always use hurricanes and natural disasters as my example, but you've all lived through the law of supply and demand. Back in March, think about what happened when we started to shut down. Sorry, I had to step out and stand in line for some paper towels, but I'm finally back. Anyway, as I was saying, Back in March, you might remember when they first sent us home from school and some of your parents got sent home from work, that it was really hard to find toilet paper and water and paper towels and antibacterial, Clorox wipes. And so you would stand in line and you'd get to the front and they'd only let you buy 1 or 2 or 4. And that's still in August, we're experiencing that. And so that is an example of the law of supply and demand. When we got told that we were being sent home, people got nervous. They thought that they weren't going to have access anymore to some of their basic necessities, so they bought them all up. The demand went up. More and more people wanted more and more cleaning supplies and toilet paper and water, and the supply went down. They weren't able to keep up with that. And so that's an example of the law of supply and demand. Price gouging you may also have experienced. So that's when they know that demand is up and they know that they're running low on supply, so they hike up the price. A few months ago, I was really excited at Kroger that they had some antibacterial finally in stock. I think it was limit 4 per customer, so I swooped up my 4 and I got to the register. This little guy was $5. I'm almost certain this was only $1 or $2 6 months ago. So I absolutely put 3 of them back, but this 1 bottle remained. I didn't want to risk leaving without any. So if you're in my classroom and this is what you see, please appreciate that I spent $5 because of the law of supply and demand and price gouging to get us some antibacterial. Niccolo Machiavelli famously said, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." I want you to think about that in terms of our government. Should we fear them? Should we love them? Is that going to make us safer? Is that going to make us a better society? As I told you all through this video, there are many forms of government to choose from, and we have many different ways that we were influenced in how we chose our government. Our founders landed on this republic. Is this the best way? Should we be under something different? Tomorrow I have an Edpuzzle for you that's going to go over the different forms of government and give you a little bit more insight into what those might look like. I also have on Wednesday 2 articles for you to read. One is entitled "The Case Against Democracy," and one is entitled "Why Democracy is the Best We've Got." You're going to watch these videos, read these articles, and then decide what is the best form of government. So, either via Flipgrid, where you're going to record your response, or on a Google Doc where you're going to type your response, you're going to follow my guidelines to answer the question. You can look forward to having a question like this every week that we're doing this virtual learning, and even if we come back in school full time. Let me go over that rubric for you. So, with this week's question, what is the best form of government, you'll notice this first row gives you full credit if you clearly state your position and thesis. So, as long as you enthusiastically and clearly tell me what you believe is the best form of government, then you're going to get your full 6 points. If you move on down the rubric, you'll see if I have to read through this or listen to your response multiple times to really understand what you're arguing, you'll lose some points. The next part of this I want you to really pay attention to. Did you use relevant facts in appropriate ways to support your position? I'm doing the research for you. You are more than welcome to watch your own videos or to read additional articles, but you have to cite at least one appropriate fact from each of the reading sources that I provide, and you have to generalize these facts correctly, right? I want you to learn how to argue using facts. This is something that everyone in our society can benefit from. The next one says, did you counter opposing positions well? What this means is I don't want to hear or see or read, well, this is the best way because the other way is stupid. Unfortunately, this is also something that society could learn more from. So what I want you to be able to do is read the other side of the argument and understand where they're coming from. Yes, you might disagree with it, but I want you to first see where they're coming from. And I want you to prove to me that you did research on both sides. The last section is, did you present a well-organized argument? I'm not giving you a time limit or a word count, but I want to make sure that you fully explain yourself. And again, this is something we're going to be doing every week, so hopefully you'll get better and better at this. And I'm going to make sure to give you a lot of feedback, especially in these first few weeks, to ensure that you're giving me what I want to see. All right, you're almost there. You've almost made it through the very first video of the very first week of Hybrid American Government with Mrs. Griffin at CTech. You've made it through your first Edpuzzle video. You're going to have one more this week. Both this video and the next video are going to be due by Wednesday at midnight. The way I have the week set up, I suggest some things that you could do Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I don't know why I don't know the weeks in order. Anyway, I'm going to suggest the order in which you do things, but you're more than welcome to do them at a quicker pace. So I have the Edpuzzles due Wednesday. Thursday is when your Flipgrid CTQ critical thinking question are due. So you have by Thursday at midnight to record yourself answering the question, what is the best form of government, or type up your response to what the best form of government is. What I need you to do once you complete that is to mark turn in on Google Classroom. please ask your academic support teacher if you're not entirely sure how that works. That's going to be super important every week that you mark turn in on Google Classroom before you get credit for anything. Think of it as you have to hand me the assignment. If you don't mark turn in, I don't know that it's complete. So once you've done both Edpuzzles, read the articles, and done the critical thinking question, your last thing for the week that I don't have due until Friday at midnight is a GimKit. So this week, I believe I have 20 to 25 terms that we've covered in today's video, tomorrow's video, and the articles to kind of help you review what we've been going over. The way I'm going to set it up this year is every 9 weeks, the student with the highest score is going to receive a gift card to a restaurant from their choice. So your best interest is to do as well as you can. To complete the GimKit this week, you're going to have to earn $10,000. I hope in academic support you were able to learn some of the power-ups and tools to help you to add up on that money quicker. Again, this is what you're going to need to ask your academic support teacher if you don't understand. And as always, please reach out to me via Remind, Google Classroom, or email, and I'll be sure to help you. I hope you've enjoyed this experience, and I look forward to seeing you next week.